Fujifilm X100VI or the Sony A7CR, both perfect for travel, but a new contender has entered the ring. The Nikon Zf. The first word that comes to mind is confidence. A retro-inspired classic design that sacrifices ergonomics for symmetry. Weight for premium materials. 710 grams, but brass dials, anyone? ISO over 50,000, engraved right onto the camera. A dedicated dial for black and white? You bet. Is this their answer to the Fuji X100VI? My name is Jack, scientist by day, street photographer by night. Like some of you, I'm guilty of switching cameras all the time, but the switch that started it all was from photo to video. I made over 1,000 videos for my college classes in my day job, and glitchy autofocus, poor dynamic range, and 8-bit codecs. I kept upgrading my cameras one by one to fix these video problems, which inevitably changed my photography experience. I've learned how to get comfortable with any new camera by changing 3 simple photography settings. The thing that helps most is shooting black and white. I started taking black and white seriously on my first trip to Tokyo. I love that city, but for first-time visitors it can be a bit much. The sensory overload is overwhelming, and my camera was the escape plan, but I was really on edge. It wasn't until I switched the viewfinder to black and white, the noise around me seemed to die down. I could see each location more clearly in monochrome, and rather than avoiding the crowds, I stayed in the thick of the action, still in the same spot, fishing for the right subject to come along. Furoshin, the immovable mind, steady when everything else is in flux. The first setting I always turn off in a new camera is the eye sensor. I only want to use the EVF, and on paper the Nikon Zf's viewfinder doesn't seem special, but somehow it is. 3.69 million dots, 0.8 times magnification, but only 60 frames per second. Nevertheless, it's a pleasure to use. It must be the OLED panel they use or the XP7 processors. All I know is it looks contrasty, clear, and very smooth. By keeping my eye up to the viewfinder at all times, I'm forced to memorize all the physical controls: aperture on the front dial, shutter speed on the back, ISO dial to the side, and before you know it, this will become second nature. Unlike photography, video settings are immovable, locked in, even before you hit record. Can't change the shutter speed. Need to obey the 180-degree shutter angle rule. You can't change aperture or autofocus settings halfway through. Furoshin, the immovable mind. Video records a minimum of 24 photos every second, so even tiny little changes can ruin the final clip. Where it shows up the most is white balance. You have to lock it in, keep it constant, or you won't be able to rescue the colors. Japan looks glorious in black and white, but there is an opportunity cost. You're leaving all the colors on the table, and you never know when you'll return. The next morning I went back to shooting color, and distractions started to enter the frame again. Visual contrast and geometry was a little less visible in color, and the volume of background noise turned up again across the city. As my SD cards filled up, the quality of my work went down. I didn't know it at the time, but I was going through creative block. The second setting I always change on a new camera is manual focus override. Knowing I can override any autofocus mechanism to manual focus gives me peace of mind while I figure out the best settings. The Zf is my first Nikon camera, and 3D tracking autofocus is great. Sticky, responsive, maybe not as good as Sony's spot tracking. It's everything I need for both photo and video. If I want more control, pulling focus from one object to another, I always know manual focus is there at the turn of a ring. Getting the colors right is the hardest part of learning a new camera, which is why I don't even bother, at least not for the first few weeks. All that matters to me is black and white. Furoshin. Even as color tonality changes across different sensors, your workflow stays the same if it's monochrome. You can figure out the colors later, especially if you shoot in RAW, which frees you up to focus on learning this new tool. Other than retro styling and price, the Fujifilm X100VI and the Nikon Zf couldn't be more different. The Nikon is a tank, significantly bigger and heavier than the Fuji. If you're after the colors of the Fuji and still want interchangeable lenses, the X-T5 may be your best bet. The third setting I always change on a new camera is auto ISO, a minimum shutter speed of 1/60 to keep ISO low, but that is no concern at all on the Nikon Zf. The 24.5 megapixel sensor might be the best low light sensor Nikon has ever made. Of course, the lower resolution hides a lot of noise, but black and white photos look great with a bit of grain. I was zone focusing at f5.6, f8 in the middle of the night, ISO 32,000 and 40,000 still looked really good. But then of course there's IBIS. Nikon claims 8 stops. I can handhold 1 second, no problem, as long as you don't mind a bit of motion blur. Bokeh Therapy is actually my second YouTube channel. When I launched my first channel on Science and Tech, it was all about the gear and the cinematography. I bought sliders and gimbals to stabilize my shots, then IBIS became the industry standard. The Nikon Zf has very steady video IBIS, shooting 85mm handheld still looks very smooth. But even with all this whipping and panning, nobody was watching. That first channel died a very slow death because I spent more time on the theatrics of production than finding the core truth for every video. An old camera locked off on a tripod beats the latest tech every time if you have the right story to tell. Fujifilm, the immovable mind, staying still even when the temptation to change and move is all around. It was my last day in Tokyo and the melancholy hit. The trip was ending and all the creative ambition I had at the start was coming up empty. I felt drained and resorted to what I thought was a cheap trick, the EVF again in black and white. The visual patterns became more visible, the gradient of light more obvious. No matter how chaotic the streets became, the monochrome viewfinder kept me calm and collected. I shot in RAW and converted the black and white back to color when I got home. Stronger composition, clearer leading lines, better use of light and shadow to showcase the color that was hiding there all along. Black and white is my heuristic for beating creative block. The industry has caught up. Video isn't a compelling reason to switch cameras anymore, so can the Nikon Zf replace my other cameras? It's early days, but I'm impressed with the design, the EVF, and the shooting experience. Eventually I'll need to contend with Nikon's color science, but for now I'm holding fast to my immovable state of black and white. Shooting in monochrome is just one of the tricks I've used to beat creative block over the years, and the other is shooting wide. I'll be doing that with the legendary Sony 24mm f1.4 G Master in the next video here when it's ready to go. I'm Jack, capturing the peace in every moment.